What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Outside the Clutch. I'm here with Mr. Justin Kobylka of Kinova. I'm really excited about this one. We've kind of talked about in the past episodes people's backstories. If you guys have watched Kinova or JKR Reptiles over the years, you've known he's been doing this for over 20 years, which is outstanding. Can you tell us kind of the story that led you into reptiles and what drove you as a college student to really dive into this?
Sure, yeah, 20 years this year actually breeding snakes. So, boy, like it's hard to find the beginning of it. I still remember the first snake I saw as a kid. Rural Oklahoma, opened up some grass and saw a big old black snake, and like the terror that was in me, and yet like the fascination, right? Ran home to my parents, and they were both scared of snakes, but I just had I had this connection to it. I had to go see it, try to find it again. And through the years, just collecting anything you could find. And my parents would never let me have a snake. I could always have I had lizards and frogs, turtles, right? But never snakes. And so that just made me want like snakes so bad, right?
As we all do, right? Oh, we can't have that. That's what I want.
Right. I tell my parents all the time, I'd be a normal person if they just let me have a pet snake as a kid. But yeah, it's just one of those things. And then I got into high school. I started keeping them in my dorm room in high school and hiding them. I had a rattlesnake under my bed in a dorm room. Like school hated that.
You said a rattlesnake?
Yeah, we'd catch rattlesnakes outside. Against in Oklahoma, and we'd keep them under our bed. My roommate and I. Yeah. So yeah, I just go through high school. I had them, collected them. Then I went to Africa for a year between high school and college, and I actually went to Benin where ball pythons are kept. Now, I did not think anything about ball pythons at the time. Did not care about them whatsoever. I loved snakes still, but I was still trying to catch mambas and more exciting.
The venomous kind of fascinated you, right?
Well, yeah. Well, it's a fascination with danger as a teenager, right? And I was 19 at the time, but then I came home. I started in college, and my first snake kind of that got me back into it was a carpet python, and then I bought some Cinnalone milk snakes from right here, Jim Sargent, who's here, All Reptiles. He sent me two Cinnalone milk snakes and a pair, and I bred them for the first time and hatched them in my college dorm room, and that was the beginning of a love affair with breeding reptiles. Right, it's just the start of it, and I started looking into the ball pythons a little bit. Ralph Davis was starting to make some piebalds. Of course, Pete Call had already made piebalds before, but Ralph showed them to the world, right, through his
Ralph had a great demeanor.
He's like a rock star. Yeah. He's the ball python rock star. He sold the lifestyle, and I was hooked. And so I just really got into it. My senior year of college. I started to be all about. I wanted to be a ball python breeder when I grew up. And I was doing a marketing, PR degree. And so I was like, well, everything I wrote, in college back then was all about snakes. I built a website for a web design class. It was a snake website. And I did term papers about snakes. And it was like, I was just preparing, that's all I cared about. And I had a family member who invested in my first ball pythons for me because I didn't have any money. I was on the wrong side of the debt curve, after college.
Typical.
Yeah, shit. Right. I was on.
We opened our first credit card and we're like, "Oh,
I was in bad
that's
shape.
Free money."
That's right. So yeah, he bought a couple piebalds and a clown and a lavender albino for me. I was just so passionate about it, and we just took off. Honestly, back then it was such a wild west of morphs and everything, and I was just so excited about it. And yes, 20 years later, here we are. It's a completely different world.
Do you think, back then, when you saw the Ralphs and the Pete's, you were like, "That's what I'm gonna do"?
I wanted to.
The lifestyle was there, and it fascinated you. But did you think you would grow to where you are now?
Not really. Not really. I don't think I ever dreamed this big. And I didn't know the ball python world would be around 20 years from now. All I knew is I wanted to do it then. I loved the animals, and I loved what it represented. And I thought, wow, these animals are selling for a significant amount of money. That's maybe you could raise a family with this kind of money. But I didn't think you could do well. Really, I was just. I didn't dream that big, but here we are. You know, everybody said the industry would be gone in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and here we are 20 years later, and I don't see an end to it. I just see another launch point. Like, if you look at the combos that we make every year, they are as cool as they are. They're just a stepping stone to like what I'm dreaming about for the future. So I stay very energized even now.
I love that, man. Like I remember when I first came in, we were pushing the 5, 6, 7 incomplete dominance, right? And now you're seeing those doubles, those triple recessives being produced. Now there's people going like you for quads and up, which is amazing. Like it's essentially flip flop. I think every time we feel like the industry is kind of coming to almost a stagnant point, we find a way to recreate it and grow it up, it's like, I don't know how to explain it. Like
well, in the recessives, though, every time you add a recessive, you reset the clock on all the codoms. Like, you got to put all those codoms back in there and with a new level of hardness. And so, you know, it just creates a continual new challenge. And there's so many new patterns and combinations out there. We haven't like run into something where they all start looking the same yet. So we'll see. We'll see if it lasts as long as I think it will. But my dreams are still. I'm still 10 years out at least in as far as I can think. And I think once we get there, it'll be another new level.
Infinity and beyond.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
It's awesome. So you brought up clutch last year, which is outstanding. I think it's going to be a vital tool for a lot of people. What was kind of the thought process behind that? Because you see different people they're putting their tweaks on it and trying to figure out, hey, how do we really manage collections, right? Or how do we differentiate between, hey, this is my breeding collection or this is my sale collection, or however. That terminology is so weird for me. Like, it messes with my head because when I think collection, I only think my breeders. But I think that's a me thing. But,
maybe. Yeah, interesting. So when it comes to collection management in general, there has been, I think historically, it's always been about doing the tasks you do every day in a digital way. Like, you know, recording your feedings, your breedings, your sheds, and of course what animals you have, and putting it into the computer to where it's searchable and usable. That's like the historical way, and people keep doing it better and better. But with clutch, we stepped back and said, we're not going to do that. We're about genetics, knowing what you have and creating the future, right? And having good relationships in there. So it's kind of like creating almost like an AKC for snakes, with complete histories and genealogies. And the system does it automatically. So it seems complicated when you say that. Like, oh no, I'm not. All you do is do what you're doing now. But when you input your snake, the system makes all the relationships. And so a few years, you just continue what you're doing now in clutch, you'll have this really complex web where you'll be able to trace the genetics of every snake, where it came from, where it's going. If you find some change in some grandparent, you can automatically trickle the change down to all the babies and find out where it came from. If you sell a snake to somebody else, they'll get complete records of when it hatched, when it sold, who it sold to, how many clutches it made for them, who it sold to next, how many clutches it made for them, like what genes were added when. So someone can't just like add 3 genes later when they want to sell it. It'll be recorded in the system that, look, after 4 years, 3 genes were added to the snake. That's very suspicious. People honest.
That's great.
Right. Well, I think that the dishonest people won't want to use our product.
Right.
But for people who really care, it'll be a good way for people to say, listen, there's some real transparency here. And I think a lot of people, it's going to work out really, really well. They're going to love it. I know for me, I built it for me. And I think, built it, what it's going to do for our industry, it's going to simplify the complexity. Because when I look at where we've come, we're talking about how complicated things are becoming. It's harder and harder for the layperson, first of all, to just jump in and learn it, right? Because the learning curve is so steep now, right? There's just too much to know. So we hopefully will reduce that a little bit. But even more so, the complexity of the genes, if you have, say 4 recessives and 3 codoms, like we're probably 2 years away from that. It gets to be just too much, right, for any person to keep. So the system can track it. And not just that, when you go to hatch a clutch or whatever, it knows what genes are in there. It makes only those genes available to you. It knows it won't let you create combos that can't be made because of allelics or whatever. You can't say something is pied and het pied at the same time. You can't do stuff like that, you know? And so it takes away a lot of the complexity and difficulty for people who really don't know everything yet. And so the system will kind of nanny them a little bit, which is kind of nice, right?
It's almost like a working AI.
Right. Well, there's so much we can go as far as that way, you know, over time. But I think over time, it's going to make it so that people can continue to, with a little bit of a crutch from the computer, continue to do what they do best, which is enjoy the animals and not get too in the weeds about all the genetics, which we know are just being kept for you. And again, if you have some gene pop out later, you can look at it and you can trace back where it come from. Okay, now we know the grandparent had that gene. I see that. Okay, show me every baby that grandparent's ever made. Bam, shows every one. How many in my collection still? 4 of them. Okay, let's mark those 4 as possible, that gene now. And also, if you've either bought those animals from him, it'll also notify them. Hey, the grandparent of this animal, we just added a gene to it, you know, just letting you know, so they can choose to whether or not to change their collection too. So it's taking, I think, the complexity, making it into a simple form for people to continue to dream and live with the snakes. So yeah.
One of the things that I really like about my show is we're all very passionate about this industry, but I like to a little bit dive into the person as well. That's why I called it Outside the Clutch.
Sure.
I want people to look at the breeder as a person and not just the breeder. So
Right.
you have many fascinations in your life that you really enjoy. You've showed us a little bit of that.
Sure.
Like your love for race cars and riding on the track and comedy. And
Yeah.
What's one of the things that some people, that you're willing to divulge, of course, that some people might not know about Justin?
I don't know. I think my life's been kind of an open book for the last few years, more or less, you know. But we're a little unique in the family because we have a big family of 5 kids. We homeschool them, and we have 26 acres and lots of farm animals, and you know, try to raise them old school a little bit.
You do almost like a homesteading, or
in a way. We're not raising our own vegetables or milking our own cows, but we do enjoy our animals, you know, and of course the snakes take up a lot of time, right? So they're all on camp on the property as well, and so I don't know, kind of the old school mentality a little bit. But then of course there's the race cars, which is super fun. Gotten into that. We're building a big garage for them right now. And
is that your fix for the teenage? I need adventure and danger almost.
Maybe so. It's when you're in a race car, it's like a lot of things you do that are kind of extreme sports, but you go into a state of flow, right? And there's so much focus on the track, on the next apex of the next turn, and the cars that are screaming up behind you or whatever, that there's nothing else exists in the world while you're in that moment. And that's what's so amazing about it.
Is that kind of your piece too?
Yeah, right. It is very peaceful in a way, and very technical, and you don't think about ball pythons for a few minutes, you know? But yeah, it's great. And then I only do it like once a month. I'd say I go out and get on a track somewhere. It's not really racing. It's more racing against the clock. You try and beat yourself, beat your own previous best time, and tinker with your car a little bit. But there's a good amount of just like, I'm not going to let that guy catch me kind of vibe too.
That competition sense kicks in.
Right. Oh yeah, big time.
Love that.
But we're not bumping each other. You know, we're trying to go home at the end of the day. So
as it should be.
Yeah. And then the comedy. I'm doing that again this month. Hopefully at the end of the month. And that's just a little bit of fun. It's never going to be a career or anything. I'm not that funny, but I enjoy it. So yeah,
okay.
Good distraction.
And then you've opened your facility to your Patreon, which is great. I think it's a wonderful thing. How has that kind of broadened your outlook on how people are starting to kind of build their stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really broadened my outlook a lot on my customers and people in this industry, because it's easy to lose perspective being in the position I've been in for a long time. And also, when I built my business from scratch, the climate was so different than it is now, right? And so I deal with people every day who are trying to build a collection, trying to buy some animals that either their investment financially or just an investment in their family or a hobby, right? That's whatever it is. Like understanding those people, understanding like what they're trying to accomplish, and like what advice I can give them and everything, which is mostly the Patreon stuff. But yeah, super awesome, and it's really made me think a lot about the business that I wouldn't have thought about it. I'm thinking about it from different perspectives. So, yeah.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to the
Thank
next
you so
one with
much.
you.
I enjoyed it.